Chapter 276. Well, there was no pressure at all when she thought about it this way. Hellion Vivian was in a good mood as she glanced at the contract book that was placed in an obvious position. Her lips curled up into a smile. She thought of those overbearing presidents in the modern world who had to appease the other party after using them. She had to follow this pattern. Ching Zhon, Hellion Vivian ordered outside, "We will make barbecue tonight." Ching Zhon paused. "Princess's appetite has improved." "Well, just like that. It's mainly because His Highness likes to eat meat." Hellion Vivian continued to smile. She thought that she could not be more considerate. She was really a qualified overbearing president. Ching Zhon only turned her head away silently. She had been a death attendant in the palace for so many years. It was the first time she heard that His Highness liked to eat meat. Eunuch Sun laughed and said, "You can go and prepare. As the saying goes, to conquer a man's heart, you must conquer that man's stomach." Princess is finally enlightened. Ching Zhon glanced at him and said slowly, "Eunuch Sun, are you sure it's not because Princess likes to eat meat?" Eunuch Sun was speechless. The sun gradually set in the west. Half of the sky was dyed red. The golden and yellow light shone from the horizon, shrouding the entire palace in an intoxicating softness. The delicate and soft afterglow shone in through the curtains that were pulled up. Hellion Vivian hung the iron rack that was used to barbecue meat. Ching Zhon watched at the side. She really did not understand how Miss Hellion had not lived for more than 10 years. She looked like a ruffian no matter how she looked. Well, this might be the special part of their princess. Beligaju had not returned yet. He was probably busy with the imperial court. He didn't seem to like anyone disturbing him. Therefore, there were very few palace maids and eunuchs in the palace. This made Hellion Vivian feel at ease. Originally, she wanted to pay respects to the Empress, but who knew that Eunuch Sun would only say, "No need." When His Highness is free, he will naturally take Wang Fei to the Emperor Emeritus. During this period of time, the Emperor Emeritus is also busy and can't leave. Just like that, the Empress was automatically filtered out. The smart Hellion Vivian naturally understood the meaning behind his words. Since His Highness said that she didn't need to pay her respects, then she wouldn't go. Anyway, she was too lazy to deal with people who weren't on their side. She also didn't want to see people from the Murong Manor. Furthermore, according to the current situation in the court, the prince that Empress Murong gave birth to is already 4 years old. Presumably, he is currently vying with a certain highness for the position of crown prince. However, it was just a brat. If His Highness really wanted to play with them, he would have played them to death long ago. How could the little prince be allowed to live? Hellion Vivian couldn't help but smile when she thought about it. She took a deep breath and stretched her body. Then, she slowly walked into the temporary kitchen and began to tidy up the lamb in her hands. The mutton had to be marinated before the roasted ribs would taste good. Hellion Vivian had always studied food and never mistreated herself. Naturally, her cooking skills were very good. In addition, she was in the palace, so Eunuch Sun could help her get whatever she wanted. However, Eunuch Sun's smile was too enthusiastic and unrestrained. Every time he passed something to her, his face was full of excitement. This made Hellion Vivian very puzzled. However, it didn't matter. She would be able to eat fish and meat in a while. She also made spicy shrimp. She didn't know if His Highness ate shrimp. When she was in the academy, she only knew that he didn't eat eggplants. "Does Beligaju eat shrimp?" Hellion Vivian turned her head and asked Eunuch Sun, who was following behind her. Eunuch Sun was stunned. He thought for a while, but he couldn't remember. "Probably. His Highness is a person. He is very indifferent to anything I ask him to eat." Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows and sighed softly. "I know." She would observe in a while. After the two of them finished talking, a tall and straight figure in white walked towards the palace in the dusky twilight. It was Beligaju. At this time, he was giving orders to Shadow. The little eunuch beside him was holding a lot of memorials and silently followed behind him. Just as he reached out to loosen his collar, he saw Hellion Vivian coming out with a small iron bowl. When she saw him, she immediately showed a faint smile. "You're back." Belagaju looked at Hellion Vivian and stopped. Hellion Vivian curved her thin lips. There were light flower marks on her face. Her face was full of surprise and there was no trace of moisture. Her eyes were very beautiful, so bright that people couldn't resist. For a moment, Bailey Jiaoju felt that women were indeed a little difficult to understand. However, Belagaju was very tactful. He nodded and handed the thing in his hand to Shadow. Shadow and the little eunuch retreated after seeing this. Hellion Wei bent down and took out the lamb chops from the iron plate. Her movements were dashing as she used the iron fork and placed it directly on the iron rack. Below was a fire that was already lit. She applied a layer of oil and instantly, the aroma of the lamb filled the air. Belagaju was still staring at Hellion Vivian. Hellion Wei's little face darkened as she flipped the lamb chop over. Only then did she raise her head and look at him again. He could still be so handsome even with a broken head. She reckoned that in this world, other than a certain highness, she couldn't find a second person like him. There was a layer of white cloth wrapped around his forehead and tied directly behind his head. It did not look like he was injured. Instead, it was a new look, a bit like how he looked when he hurt his eyes previously. This made Hellion Wei recall that he was her deskmate who had gone through life and death with her. She felt a little uncomfortable. She coughed and directly reached out her hand to touch that strip of cloth, saying, "If you were to touch my head or my face or something like that, I wouldn't have done this." Belagaju glanced at the back of Hellion Vivian's neck when he heard this. After she finished speaking, she lowered her head and continued to fiddle with the lamb chop. The soft hair on the back of her neck was exposed. Belagaju's fingers twitched a few times as he forcefully suppressed the thought of touching it again. He only gave a faint hum. Who said something to her that made her let go of the matter of that night? Although this little prey who didn't randomly scratch people was very obedient. However, looking at her, it seemed like she had the intention of letting go of the past with a smile. Chapter 277. Right, do you eat shrimp? Hellion Vivian cleverly began to change the topic. Belagaju nodded absent-mindedly. It didn't matter to him what he ate. Hellion Vivian raised the corner of her mouth. Then what about the eggplant? Belagaju paused for a few seconds. Although there was no expression on his face, his dark eyebrows were slightly furrowed as if he was holding back a lot of awkwardness, but he still nodded. Hellion Vivian finally knew how to distinguish what he ate and what he didn't eat. Whenever he furrowed his eyebrows, he didn't eat. Hellion Vivian curled her lips into a smile and then went to prepare her lamb. Her stomach was tight and the smell of meat was everywhere. There was lamb chops in the yard and a large pot of spicy shrimp on the small sandalwood table. The bright red chili and the green side dishes complemented each other and were very appetizing. Eunuch Sun had never seen this kind of cooking before and couldn't help but take a few more looks. Hellion Vivian used the bamboo chopsticks to help him scoop a large bowl. She didn't tell him to sit down. She knew that even if she asked, Eunuch Sun would sit down and feel uncomfortable sitting. Eunuch Sun's eyes lit up as he gave half of it to the little brats to try. He said that it was all given by Hellion Vivian so that they would remember Wang Fei's kindness. Hellion Vivian smiled and let them leave. Those who were eating should go eat. When she turned back, a certain highness had already started to peel the shrimp. She originally thought that with his personality, he definitely wouldn't touch these things. Eating shrimp was not a small challenge for a person with misophobia. She originally wanted her to peel it for him. After all, every domineering president had to take care of the other person. This was a killing move. But now it seemed, he didn't need her at all. Why was the royal family so hard to deal with? Hellion Vivian felt a little melancholy. Belagaju's movements were clearly not fast, but in the blink of an eye, he could peel an entire shrimp. The tail and the shrimp were all there, delicate and transparent. Holding it in his white fingers, it was very artistic. Unlike Hellion Vivian, who was usually fast at cooking, she would not peel the prawns unless she had no other choice. She would just put the prawns in her mouth. Probably because he couldn't stand the way she ate, the man frowned and put the peeled prawn on her plate before peeling the second one. Hellion Vivian squinted her eyes and smiled. She thanked him. After eating more than 10 prawns, she found that there were 6 or 7 prawns in front of His Highness. They looked very beautiful. At this time, he wiped his slender hands, picked up the bamboo chopsticks, and ate the prawns one by one. His movements were so graceful that Hellion Vivian grabbed Eunuch's son, who was serving the wine, and whispered, "What kind of hobby does he have?" Eunuch's son looked at his master and smiled like a Metria Buddha. "Oh, this is His Highness' habit. He pursues beautiful things, so every time he eats, he has to arrange the food in its most beautiful state before eating." Hellion Vivian, no wonder he bought such a strange bed. His Highness had so many unknown hobbies. However, she also noticed that he liked to eat prawns very much. Because he didn't pick up anything else from just now. She didn't see him take a bite of the lamb chop when she handed it to him. Hellion Vivian thought, fished out a prawn, peeled it, and put it on his plate. She finally found the way to be a domineering president. When Eunuch's son saw her actions, his face instantly turned pale. He thought that it was over. His Highness would definitely flip the table over with a kick. How dare the Princess Consort use her own chopsticks to pick up food for His Highness? However, what surprised Eunuch's son was that his master actually ate the prawn without any hesitation. After Madame Su took a deep breath, she put her hand on Hellion Jiao's long hair. "Even if you don't have a mother, the 4 elders will still support you and let you sit in the most precious position in the world." Only then did Hellion Jiao stop crying. Her tone carried panic, "But the day of the clan's selection for the clan leader is very near. I heard that father still wants to bring that little slut back." "Mother, you definitely can't let her come back. Even more so, you can't let her return to the Hellion clan and regain power. At that time, that old monk's words will come true one by one. I'm afraid that the 4 elders will doubt my identity as the Phoenix Girl. Don't worry, that little vile spawn won't have a chance to come back." Madame Su patted her hand, then said in a poisonous voice, "She still lacks the most important selection condition." Hellion Jiao was puzzled. What condition? Chapter 278. Back then, there was a hidden army in the general's residence. Your father and I tried to get Hellion Vivian's mother to speak a few times in order to get our hands on the hidden army. Who knew that the little bitch's mouth would be as hard as a rock and she wouldn't reveal anything? But one thing is for sure, she had already inherited the hidden army at that time and wanted to drag your father down. However, she was injured at that time, and she was constantly implicated by that little bastard, Hellion Wei, so there was no way for her to contact her. Your father and I guessed that in order for the hidden army to appear, there must be an opportunity. In the end, we inquired about a lot of things and finally understood what was going on. In order to truly inherit the Hellion family, one must have outstanding martial chi, and 2, be personally acknowledged by the hidden army. However, the hidden army only recognized talismans and not people. Once you have the army of God, not only would you be able to inherit the Hellion family, even the imperial family would have to be wary of you. The army of God was made up of the elites of the elites. Although they were not as skilled as the Battle Dragon army, they were better at marching and assassinating. They were the best mercenaries in the world, and no one could surpass them. However, ever since old Master Hellion died, no one knows where that talisman went. Hellion Jiao hurriedly interrupted Su Yang Mo. "What about Hellion Vivian's mother? She must know where the general's residence is." She did know, but she didn't say anything until she died. At the thought of this, Su Yang Mo gritted her teeth in hatred. However, it doesn't matter. In another 3 months, if General Zhong's residence still doesn't appear, the hidden army will automatically appear and recognize your father as their leader. This is the rule of the Hellion family. When Hellion Jiao heard this, she let out a sigh of relief. In other words, no matter what that slut does, she'll only gain fame at most. She'll still end up with nothing. Don't even think about getting a single cent from my defense division. Of course, even the imperial family can't interfere in the family's affairs. No matter how famous she is, it's just a decoration. Su Yang Mo stroked the Hellion Jiao's hair and said viciously, "After so many years of searching for this Zhong family mansion, your father and I are tired of it. I reckon that in a month's time, the hidden army will be here. It seems that the courtyard is no longer useful. Men. burn that abandoned room in the east courtyard, so that it won't be an eyesore. Yes. The martial attendants accepted the order and retreated. Hellion Jiawa broke into a smile. But mother, on the day of the wedding, Hellion Vivian didn't show any abnormality at all. Could it be that she really wasn't possessed? She just suddenly became smarter. Not necessarily. Su Yang Mo narrowed her eyes. At that time, the fire Chelene appeared as the third prince's holy body and interrupted the chanting of the masters. The fire Chelene was a divine beast. Once it came, no scripture would work. Mother will continue to investigate this matter, but the master's actions seem to have angered the third prince, so it's not convenient for us to do anything now. Hellion Jiawa pursed her thin lips. That's because His Highness doesn't know that Hellion Vivian has been possessed. If His Highness knew, he would definitely be on guard against her. Don't worry, when that servant girl appears, Hellion Vivian will become a piece of trash that no one wants. When that time comes, Mother will let her have a taste of what it means to be discredited. Su Yang Mo exchanged a few more words with the Hellion Jiawa. When she went out again, she saw Hellion Mai looking at her. Her eyes seemed to be full of resentment, but it also seemed like there was nothing. She only said softly, "Mother, I'm also your daughter." Then, as if she was risking her life, she reached out her hand and pulled the bookshelf hard. The books on top fell down one by one with a bang 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 sound, burying Hellion Wei Wei in the middle of the books. Little Hellion Vivian's hands and feet curled into a ball. She wanted to speak, but Hellion Nau glanced at her. She could only cover her mouth, and big drops of tears fell from her eyes. "Mother, Sister Yu, why are you in such a sorry state? You don't look like the queen of the capital's circle at all." Who was talking? Hellion Vivian wanted to take a closer look, but she realized that there was only darkness in front of her. She couldn't see anything at all. "You're obviously a tomboy, but you have a beautiful face. Even the Emperor can't forget you. Sister Yu, you're really capable. It's a pity that you don't even know how to be a wife." "Alright, Sister Su, I'll leave this to you. Do it cleanly." Then, that person left. Only then did Su Yang Mo crouch down and let out a wanton laugh. "Do you know why you lost? You're too full of yourself. Do you really think that men like cold people like you? They're just using you. Am I right, old master? Of course, she's just a piece of wood. How can she be compared to you?" Hellion Guang Yarrow reached out and hugged Su Yang Mo tightly in his arms. Su Yang Mo's delicate voice rang out in a crisp and clear voice. From the beginning to the end, Hellion Nau just laid there and watched this scene quietly. The light in her eyes gradually disappeared, as brief as the most charming meteor streaking across the sky. Hellion Vivian knew that at that moment, Hellion Nau cried. She looked at the little Hellion Vivian and opened her mouth silently. Her pale thin lips didn't have a trace of blood. She said, "Vivian, live on. You must live on." Not knowing if it was because of the connection between the body and the hand, Hellion Vivian bit her own hand tightly. It seemed that only by doing this could she remember the hatred in her mind. "Wait a minute, old master, I think she's dead." Su Yang Mo was still pretending to lie under Hellion Guang Yarrow, but when she saw that Hellion Nau was not moving, she suddenly shouted. Hellion Guang Yarrow hurriedly pulled on his belt, his face revealing a flustered fear. "Although old master Hellion isn't here, that group of Hellion family's death warriors are still here. If they know that I killed Hellion Nau, they'll definitely fight me to the death. What should I say when the time comes? Damn it, how did she die? Old master." Su Yang Mo grabbed Hellion Guang Yarrow's hand and said softly, "If it were up to me, it would be better if she died. This way, the Hellion family can truly belong to us. But if she died like this, it's impossible that the retired emperor won't ask. When the time comes and he really sends someone down and finds out that it was me who did it, everything will be over for me." Hearing that, Su Yang Mo smiled viciously. "Isn't that simple? How she died is still up to us. She was originally injured and dragged on for such a long time." Chapter 280. What if she's jealous of me? Su Yang Mo curled her lips, her eyes filled with venom. "Don't worry, she doesn't fit in. She only knows how to play with her military strategies and swords all day long. The ladies in the capital have long been sick of her. Plus, she didn't even show up on our wedding day. I've already told my sisters that she has a strange temperament and can't tolerate me at all. She's suspicious and jealous, and her heart is as small as a needle. It's not strange for such a woman to die from her own jealousy, don't you think so, old master? Why didn't I think of this? Helian Guang Yarrow enjoyed it very much and hugged Su Yang Mo affectionately. You're really my lucky star. Su Yang Mo smiled gently. However, Helian Guang Yarrow was still worried about one thing. But Helian Nau is gone, which means that the military seal is gone. What's the big deal? There's still that little bastard. Su Yang Mo comforted Helian Guang Yarrow softly and patted his chest with her small hand. It could be said that she was considerate of everything. As long as she's here, you can always hold the power of the Helian family for her. She's your daughter. It's only right for a father to hold the power for his daughter. So that's how it is, so that's what they were planning. Helian Vivian seemed to have been pulled away. She looked at the little body that was vaguely running a high fever. She was probably frightened, after all, she was still young. Faintly, she heard someone's voice through Helian Vivian's ears. That voice was a little deep, like the cry of an owl, which made people feel very uncomfortable. The blood of the Helian family is better than elixirs to replenish qi. Drain this woman's blood and let your daughter drink it. It will definitely be useful in the future. Yes, Su Yang Mo answered happily. Helian Vivian's arms went limp and she leaned over to lie under the empty pile of books. When she woke up again, she had forgotten everything. Children in their 50s and 60s, after encountering extremely terrifying things, would indeed seal their true memories and replace them with another vague memory. However, Helian Vivian thought that if it was her, she would not forget. She would remember it forever. These people's faces. These people's voices. Then. Let them pay with blood. It was just like when Elder Tang had asked her why she wanted to join the Tang sect. For revenge, she said. Elder Tang looked at her and shook his head. However, young Master Tang asked her to stay. When she couldn't see the light and almost gave up. He gave her her only hope. She asked the noble young master who was in his own world, tapping on a notebook with one hand and piling up blocks with the other. Why did you leave me here? If I join the Tang sect for revenge, I won't be a good person in the future. He didn't look up, only holding the blocks in his hand. Helian Vivian felt that it was ridiculous for her to ask such a question to an autistic child who barely spoke a few words in a year. There must be someone you love very much in your heart. That's why you won't allow anyone to hurt her. Young Master Tang put down the building blocks and raised his head. There was no emotion in his eyes. It suits the Tang sect to use unscrupulous means to protect. In order to protect, he would do anything. When Helian Vivian opened her eyes, for a moment, she didn't know where she was. She could only stare blankly at the luxurious bed ceiling, her eyes dry. What are you thinking about? A deep voice sounded beside her ear. Helian Vivian's eyes lit up as if she had seen a family member. Tang, however, when he turned his head, his voice stopped abruptly. Beligaju stopped wiping his hands and suddenly smiled. The corners of his mouth curved into an icy color. Tang? Tang what? Nothing, just a friend. Helian Vivian rubbed her aching head. I thought you were him. The two of you sound very similar. Oh, just a friend. Beligaju reached out and lifted her chin. The black jade on his pinky finger flashed with a cold light. How come I didn't know that you had a friend with the surname Tang? The princess seems to have many secrets that I don't know. Helian Vivian's heart skipped a beat. She was afraid that the other person would find out that she was a foreign soul. She gently smiled and said, It's a childhood friend. Of course you don't know. Beligaju didn't speak again. His eyes fell on Helian Vivian's face. His body was inexplicably cold. His eyes were deep, as if there was a dangerous abyss hidden in the darkness. Helian Vivian didn't know what he was looking at. First, she blinked. Then she found that his hair was wet. She took the white towel at hand and helped him dry his head. Beligaju's fingers paused. His hostility was finally restrained. However, his tone was still light. What are you afraid of? What am I afraid of? Hellion Vivian's voice was hoarse. I'm afraid that you will catch a cold like me. Eunuch Sun watched from the side. He took back his hand with a smile and interrupted at the right time. His Highness knew that Wang Fei was sick and rushed back in the rain. He didn't even use an umbrella. As a servant, I was worried that His Highness would catch a cold. Now that I see that Wang Fei is taking care of him, I'm relieved. Hearing this, Beligaju looked at him. Eunuch Sun's expression didn't change. Beligaju's voice was light. When has this king ever used an umbrella? Coo. Eunuch Sun was anxious. His Highness, how can you not understand? Only by saying this can the Wang Fei be moved. This is the killing move of love, do you understand? Beligaju didn't pay attention to his blinking eyes. He only gave a cold smile. It was as if he was saying, does this king need you to teach me? Eunuch Sun's scalp went numb from his smile. He took the outer garment that his master took off and disappeared with a whoosh. When there was no one left, Beligaju reached out and grabbed Hellion Vivian's wrist. Hellion Vivian raised an eyebrow. Beligaju curled his lips into a faint smile. Since you want to help this king wipe his hair, then wipe it properly. Hellion Vivian. Isn't she wiping his hair properly? So, a moment later, she saw the man using her lap as a pillow. His smile was a little cold, but he looked very noble and leisurely. Why don't you continue? Hellion Vivian smiled. She felt like she was raising a Persian cat. She couldn't go wrong by stroking its fur. In addition, a certain highness's hair was good. That head of black hair felt like fine silk in her hand, smooth and soft. No wonder those domineering CEOs liked to rub the long hair of the people around them. Now Hellion Vivian also deeply felt it. It was just that a certain highness aura was too strong, so this scene seemed a little out of place. Hellion Vivian. When Bailey Jiaoju said these words, he did not even open his eyes. But it did not matter, she believed that the royal must have read them. With the aura of a top student, it was unreasonable not to read them. Thinking of this, she turned her head and saw Beligaju staring straight at her. Chapter 282. Hellion Vivian blinked her eyes in confusion. Beligaju raised his dark eyebrows slightly. The royal was upset again, but what was he upset about? Hellion Vivian couldn't figure it out, so she blinked again. You have read the books that the headmaster of the academy gave you, right? Let me have a look. Beligaju slowly put down the ancient scroll in his hand. Why should I let you have a look? Aren't we deskmates? Of course, deskmates should help each other. Hellion Vivian smiled gently. What she said was very reasonable. Bailey Jiaoju did not pay any attention to her. His expression was extremely cold. Hellion Vivian decided to do it herself. She wanted to get the stack of ancient scrolls that Beligaju had brought with him. Unexpectedly, Beligaju suddenly turned around and pushed her into the corner of the carriage. Then he reached out his hands to hold the window. In this way, Hellion Vivian was trapped in his arms. Hellion Vivian had no choice but to press her back against the carriage to avoid his breath. Beligaju lowered his head slightly and looked into Hellion Vivian's eyes. Only then did Hellion Wei realize that Bailey Jiaoju was actually excessively evil. Why didn't she notice it before? Shouldn't you admit your mistake first, and then discuss the problem of deskmates helping each other, Beligaju turned his face sideways. His thin lips were unbelievably beautiful. At such a close distance, he almost kissed her. Hellion Vivian didn't shrink back. She really admitted her mistake and said sincerely, I was wrong. Can I copy your ancient scrolls now? Beligaju took a deep breath, loosened his hand, and completely ignored her. Hellion Vivian smiled evilly. She opened the ancient scrolls one by one and began to look for the one that the headmaster of the academy gave her. But after a long time, however, the person lying on the soft couch casually waved his left hand. At first, Hellion Vivian thought that it would take a lot of effort to get it. She didn't expect the royal family to be so generous this time. Hellion Wei smiled faintly as she opened the ancient scroll. It was completely blank. Where's the mark you made? Hellion Vivian frowned. Why did this ancient scroll look even newer than the one she had? Bellegardeau's expression was indifferent as he closed his eyes. When did I say that I would make a mark? It means. Helene Vivian paused. You haven't read the books assigned by the headmaster of academy. Bellegardeau picked up a teacup and played with it in his hand. With a faint smile, he said, I'm not interested in reading the books I read when I was 5. How could he know so many traditional Chinese characters at the age of 5? As expected, His Highness couldn't be looked at with normal eyes. Helene Wei looked at the ancient scroll that was filled with words and felt that she, the underachiever, had been deeply insulted. How did His Highness grow up? Could it be that he was like young Master Tang, who belonged to the special group of people who could finish in 2 or 3 moves while others spent half a day to study? So why did such a creature as a straight-A student exist in the world? Helene Vivian was a little sad for a while and then said, Since you've read it, you should know what the key points are, right? Tell me, and I'll draw them. Tell you? Bellegardeau glanced sideways and seemed to think of something. He suddenly smiled, Okay, but I want to get something in return. Before Helene Vivian could ask what he wanted, she was pulled over by him and pressed into his arms. Then he bent his enviable long legs and pointed at the ancient scroll indifferently. His fingers were as slender as jade. Here, draw it. This kind of position. Helene Wei got used to the elegant smell behind her ear. Then, she picked up the brush and started to mark the place that Bailey Jiaoju pointed out to her. He didn't make any extra movements. Helene Wei knew that her back had bumped into a chest. She wanted to avoid it, but her 4 limbs were restrained by him. Beneath her long legs was the fabric of the robe. Waves of hot air could be felt. She could even feel the breath of the other party entering her pores when he breathed. When she came to the Dragon War Empire, she always wanted to set up a military fire team. Because once this kind of thing was found out, the imperial family would definitely not forgive her. Now that she has the cooperation of the 3rd prince, she can freely prepare. But, if a prince sells military fire privately, won't it be considered a rebellion? The current situation is so chaotic, isn't he afraid? Bellegardeau's voice was indifferent. The imperial family needs this batch of military fire to suppress the forces of the 4 sides. So it was allowed by the retired emperor and the emperor. Helene Vivian didn't need Bellegardeau to explain too clearly, she understood everything. This is really a good project, money is easy to get. When the time comes, tell me how many people you need. Bellegardeau paused for a moment, then pulled her over. Give me a pleasing name. Her. Helene Vivian didn't react for a moment. What name? Bellegardeau lowered his eyes. The name of the military fire business. She gave it. She always had no interest in giving names. Helene Vivian opened her mouth. Just as she was about to speak, she heard Eunuch Sun's voice come from outside the carriage. Your Highness, the sky is going to be dark. If we don't go up the mountain now, it will be too late. After he finished speaking, Eunuch Sun silently raised his head. He thought in his heart, the princess is so strong, will His Highness be able to handle it? Should he have the kitchen make some nourishing soup for His Highness to drink? Helene Vivian met Eunuch Sun's gaze and knew what he was thinking. She wanted to explain a few words. Bellegardeau sent him away. Go and bring my horse over. Yes. Eunuch Sun's eyes were very bright. He knew that his master didn't want to reveal his identity, so he prepared an ugly black horse and let the 2 of them go up the mountain separately. Helene Vivian continued to sit in the carriage. After all, everyone knew that the princess was going back to the academy, so the carriage must be there. As for the matter of His Highness getting into the carriage, no one knew except for them. Bellegardeau got off the carriage. For the rest of the journey, Qing Zhon accompanied Helene Vivian. She served Helene Vivian as usual. She didn't say anything, but there was a subtle look in her eyes when she looked at Helene Vivian. Helene Vivian held her forehead. Girl, it's not what you think. I understand. Qing Zhon thought for a while and put down the teapot that she was pouring tea for Helene Vivian. She looked serious. His Highness is so handsome that it's easy for people to lose control. Hellion Vivian. Lose control? Lose control? So the princess must keep an eye on His Highness. Qingzhon lowered her eyes, hinting at something. Hellion Vivian raised her thin lips and smiled playfully, but she didn't take it to heart. I know. Don't worry about him. Let's talk about you. Which courtyard do you want to go to? Me. Qingzhon paused. She always thought that she was just a servant. Hellion Vivian answered lazily, You are His Highness Death Soldier. Your qualifications should be good. I think you can go to the fine courtyard, but you have to be tested. Hearing Hellion Vivian praising herself, Qingzhon was happy. Which courtyard is the princess in? The fine courtyard. Hellion Vivian coughed softly. I'm in the inferior courtyard. Qingzhon. How bad is the White Academy's poor student? But she won the martial qi competition. Qingzhon felt that she couldn't understand the princess in front of her. If what Heizhu said was true, and her sister came back, then the princess's situation, Qingzhon didn't continue to think about it. She only hoped that the princess could become stronger. In that case, there might be some chance of winning. Chapter 284. The Curtain of Night Fell, Murong Manor. Chang Feng, your return to the academy this time is mainly to cover Miss Yun's identity, do you understand? The person who spoke was none other than Empress Murong. Murong Chang Feng's eyes flashed. Aunt, don't worry, I understand. That's good. Empress Murong smiled, her eyes carrying calculation. Right now, my son is still young, but that vile spawn's power is growing day by day. With this Miss Yun as a check, we can always cut off his left and right arms. Murong Chang Feng naturally knew who the vile spawn his aunt was talking about was, but he didn't pay much attention to this. Instead, he asked, Aunt, that Miss Yun has already entered the academy? Naturally, she has. Empress Murong's white hand picked up the teacup beside her, blew the tea leaves inside, and said, This woman is not simple. She reached the gold rank at such a young age. What's important is that she made a good armament. The people who came out from that vile spawn side are always different from others. In addition, that vile spawn treated her differently at that time. Her identity is said to be a servant girl, but in reality, she's better off than some of the young ladies in the capital. White Academy's test, to her, is not difficult at all. Murong Chang Feng heard this and muttered absent-mindedly, she also knows how to make armaments. What Hellion Vivian knows, she knows. Empress Murong smiled, the corners of her mouth carrying poison. Hellion Vivian doesn't know, she's also good at it. Putting her in White Academy is the most suitable. The people of the Hellion family always think that they are omnipotent, but in the end, they still lose everything. Chang Feng, don't worry, Aunt knows that the girl of the Hellion family made you look bad. This time, Aunt will make her pay back everything. Murong Chang Feng didn't speak, even somewhat distracted. But Empress Murong didn't notice, only thinking about the good news that she would hear soon, the corners of her mouth slowly curved up. The night wind became stronger, but at the top of the mountain, it was calm. There was a door lock in the academy, so when the sky turned dark, the road leading down the mountain would be closed. For so many years, the reason why White Academy was known as the most powerful academy was also because of its strict atmosphere. Even the time for the lanterns to be hung was regulated. When the students returned to the academy, a master would lead a group of teachers to maintain order. During the first half of the semester, Hellion Vivian did everything by herself. Now that she had Qingzhon's help, her speed was much faster. The bathroom was still the same as before, but Hellion Wei, who was already familiar with the road, no longer lost her way. She remembered that before, it was because she couldn't distinguish between a man and a woman that she bumped into a certain highness who was taking a bath. But now that she thought about it, His Highness's figure was really good. That kind of beauty that was hard to ignore, she was afraid that there was no other person in the world who could compare to him. In the future, she could draw a painting for His Highness while he was sleeping and then sell it. She would definitely make a lot of money. Small capital and huge profits. Anyway, they were already married. She could learn from him in whatever she did, saying that she was adapting. After Helene Vivian made up her mind, she took a change of robe and went into the bathroom in a good mood. She was very handsome when she took off her clothes. Probably because she was used to being a secret agent, her fingers twitched and the belt loosened slightly. The robe fell to the ground as she walked. The bamboo forest swayed. Helene Vivian soaked herself in the hot spring pool. Thinking about the scene in her dream, her eyes darkened. Chapter 286. Qing thought that the words were not meant for her. She raised her head and looked into Nangong Lai's eyes. She knew that the words were meant for her. She thought for a while and said, "Princess Consort is good to me." "Is that so?" Nangong Lai sneered, "So you don't plan to come back?" "Go back." Qing frowned. Didn't he want to see her the most? Helene Vivian smiled lazily, "Of course not. Student, don't forget that Qing belongs to me now. Please sit down and don't disturb our class." "Disturb your class?" Nangong Lai's eyes turned cold, but his face was still evil. "This is the first time I heard that Miss Helene would be serious in class." Helene Vivian did not say anything. She only put her hand on Qing shoulder and smiled gently at Nangong Lai. Nangong Lai did not look at her. He still looked at the little servant. Seeing that she did not want to help him, he clenched his hands under the long sleeves. The smile at the corner of his mouth became wider. "Do as you like. Go wherever you want. If you are bullied in the future, don't come back." Swoosh. Nangong Lai flipped the book in his hand very loudly. This made the official's daughter who came in with him bite her lips in fear. "What happened?" "Nothing." Nangong Lai's lips curled into a smile, his voice carrying a sense of comfort. "Did I scare you?" The official's daughter looked at the little servant. "A little." "Sorry, continue reading." Nangong Lai was still Nangong Lai. But the official's daughter did not understand where the coldness came from. Qing did not say anything from the beginning to the end. She took out the brush that Helene Vivian needed and arranged it dutifully. She was calm. Helene Vivian looked at the two of them and said in a low voice, "If you don't want to stay here to read these, you can go outside." "It's okay. I always like to sleep in class. I don't need you to suffer here." Qing fingers paused. She raised her head and said, "I will follow Princess Consort." "Then don't look like you're about to cry." Helene Vivian stretched out her hand and rubbed her head. She smiled faintly. "It's just a man. In this world, other things may be rare, but there are plenty of men. Especially in the White Academy, you should look around and tell me which one you like." Qing exclaimed, "Why should I tell the princess? Study it for a while, then quickly take it down." Helene Vivian's voice was very soft, with a hint of laziness. "I have a lot of underlings. I'll introduce you to them when the time comes. There are also a few who are not bad." Qing was speechless. Why does it sound like a female bandit is fighting for her husband? No matter how quiet the voices were, the prodigy priest could still hear the commotion. He clenched his fists even tighter. "The best way to forget your previous relationship is to meet a new man." Helene Vivian smiled. "Qing, you have to start over." "Start over?" Qing paused and said, "I'll go." When Nangong Lai heard the two words, he was stunned for a moment. Then, he sneered subconsciously. He seemed to want to say something, but he saw the headmaster walking in with a smile. The white robe made him look like a happy Maitreya Buddha. "Quiet, be quiet." The headmaster raised his arm and said, "There's a new student today. Everyone, let's welcome him." As soon as he finished speaking, a tall and slender man walked in. Almost at the moment when the man walked in, the surroundings seemed to have been cleared. It became especially quiet, so quiet that even the sound of a pin dropping could be heard. Helene Vivian looked up and suddenly understood why everyone became so quiet. That man was too outstanding. He was more than outstanding. He could even be compared to Beligaju. He had been wearing an ivory-white coat all his life. His dark blue hair draped over his shoulders like a brocade. Above his collar was a jade-like face that could topple all living things. Chapter 287. I'm just worried about your health. Nangong Lai's smile was devilish. There was not the slightest bit of worry in it. Instead, there was a strong sense of provocation. Hellion Vivian looked at this scene and said in a faint voice, "Classmate Shuang, I still have a seat here. You can sit here." Nangong Lai did not expect that she would speak up for Master Wu Shuang. He first looked at Hellion Vivian and frowned, then looked at Beligaju. Beligaju's face did not have any expression. After hearing Hellion Vivian's voice, he raised his beautiful eyes. Jing Wushuang's smile never stopped. "Thank you." This sentence was said to Hellion Vivian. Hellion Vivian curved her thin lips. "You're too polite. Courtesy demands reciprocity." He helped her once. She helped him once. She helped him once. Moreover, this was not much help. "I won't disturb you." Jing Wushuang first looked at the man on her left. Then, she met Hellion Vivian's gaze. The curve of her eyes was particularly gentle. Hellion Vivian smiled leisurely and replied, "No." Where the other person sat had nothing to do with her. She was mainly helping him out. After Master Wushuang sat down, he gently coughed twice and smiled at Hellion Vivian. It seemed to be able to melt all the wind, snow, rain, and dew. In this world, there was a kind of man, silently nourishing things. Just by sitting there, it would be a sight to behold. This kind of man was Jing Wushuang. Nangong Lai glanced at Bailey Jiaoju again, implying that he was not going to intervene. Bailey Jiaoju did not pay attention to him, but that pair of eyes had lost some of its original warmth. However, this did not affect his elegance. On the contrary, for some reason, this kind of elegance became even more enchanting. He reached out his hand and pointed his finger at Hellion Wei's scroll. "This part is wrong." Hellion Vivian didn't know why the topic changed to this, but she still subconsciously replied, "Didn't you ask me to draw this?" "What's wrong with that?" Beligaju faintly hummed in response. In this aspect, Hellion Wei simply didn't guard against a certain highness. Once she heard wrong, she moved her head closer. She completely didn't notice that the tacit understanding and intimacy that was revealed between her movements was seen by Jing Wushuang without leaving a trace in his eyes. Jing Wushuang narrowed her eyes and met Beligaju's gaze. Then, he was stunned. His gaze was so cold that there was no warmth in it. He was like an absolute superior, bringing with him a suffocating sense of oppression. How long had it been since he had seen such a gaze? This person, Jing Wushuang lowered her eyes. She seemed to be reading a book calmly, but in fact, she was thinking about something. The class wasn't peaceful at all. The discussions of the students were like wild weeds that grew wildly in their ears. They were all talking about this enigmatic new student, and there were many people who wanted to inquire about him. It was unknown if the inferior compound's luck was off the charts this year, but there were actually so many handsome men. It was just that the first two were like a god. He was handsome, but not easy to get close to. There were also people who wanted to send letters to Beligaju, but every time they saw his face, they would feel dizzy before they could even open their mouths. Moreover, it was very likely that this person would throw their letters to the side after receiving them. What's more, he would directly ignore them and slowly walk past them. As for the other one, he would always be surrounded by countless young girls. It was easy to get close to him, but there was no sense of security. The new one was different. His easygoing elegance made it hard for the teacher not to like him. In addition, he would occasionally cough lightly, making all the young girls feel tender affection for him. Therefore, when it was time to rest, 2 or 3 people with straightforward personalities would gather around and inquire about Jing Wushuang. Basically, Jing Wushuang would deflect all the questions with little effort. Hellion Vivian listened at the side. She couldn't help but admire the youngest head of the family. Every sentence of his was just right, and he was extremely smart. Qing Zhon didn't know Jing Wushuang's background. She just looked at the performance of Hellion Vivian and the others, and couldn't help but take a look at Jing Wushuang. Just this look made Nangong Lai's eyes even colder. He leaned his body and put his hand on Belegaju's shoulder. What is he doing here instead of staying in Armament City? Flirting with young girls? Your hand. Belegaju's eyes fell slowly, and his voice was still indifferent. You don't want it anymore? Nangong Lai's eyes evoked a dense evil aura. Arju, don't blame your brother for not reminding you. This guy most likely came for Wei Wei. Recently, Wei Zi World's momentum has been too great. As the young master of the Armaments Assembly, he'll certainly feel fear in his heart. But it's strange that Hellion Vivian would speak up for him. Listening to her, these two people have interacted before. What does this mean? People in the same industry, sympathizing with each other? Sympathizing with each other? After hearing these 4 words, Belegaju's mouth showed a dazzling coldness. It was so cold that Nangong Lai swallowed all the words he was about to say. Meanwhile, the other students were still immersed in the newcomer. Oh right, have you heard? There is a new student from the superior compound. She looks like a fairy. I don't know which family she is from. She is young, but her martial chi value is very high. She lit up the whole crystal ball. Even the dean is full of praise for her. More importantly, she can make armaments, and she has a high-quality weapon on her. Is there really such a person? Where did she come from? I have never heard of such a person in the capital. I don't know either, but this news must be true. The teacher from the superior compound admitted it himself. The news about the new student was the talk of the town, but this was the most common thing for Hellion Vivian. There were very few things that could arouse her interest. Plus, she was now focused on how to find the hidden army, so she did not pay attention to these things. However, what she cared about was that Yuan Ming said in her ear, "This girl is really interesting." When Hellion Vivian looked up, she saw a young girl standing in the commercial courtyard that she often visited. She looked like she was choosing books. However, besides Hellion Vivian, very few people came to this place. Logically speaking, it should not be convenient for Elder Huan to appear when there were other people around. However, today, he sat steadily in the courtyard with a cup of hot tea by his hand. Hellion Vivian smiled and walked over. She envied her sister's talent and felt that only such a woman was worthy of His Highness, so she never dared to have any delusions. That ugly woman was just lucky to get the retired emperor's approval. Otherwise, His Highness would not have agreed to marry her. However, she did not say this to Anying because the lesson last time was enough for her. She was now only waiting for Anying to tell His Highness the news of her sister's return. She wanted to see what would happen to that ugly woman. Even if there is no Hellion Vivian, there will be someone else to be the princess. I don't understand what you are saying. Heizhu's gorgeous face changed, as if her whole body was covered with thorns. Bai Mai's eyes shone brightly. You know, it's not up to us to decide whether Hellion Wei Wei is a good match for His Highness or not. Now, His Highness is going to make an example out of his subordinates for her. If you continue to be stubborn, sooner or later, it will be your turn. Heh. You mean His Highness is going to kill me for a chess piece? Heizhu seemed to have heard an incredible joke. She laughed softly. Bai Mai, you are the one who doesn't understand. Why does His Highness want to marry that ugly woman? Is it because of the retired emperor? If His Highness really cares about Hellion Vivian, why would he protect her so obviously at the wedding? We know very well what kind of person His Highness is. In order to protect my sister, His Highness has never shown his feelings in front of others. He personally told us that as a man of sacrifice, the most important thing is to be patient. But as a king, he knows to hide what he likes, and push forward what he doesn't care. Don't you think Hellion Vivian is just a shield for His Highness? Bai Mai frowned. Yes, I admit what you said before, but His Highness doesn't need to make such a shield for himself. It's necessary, because... Heizhu suddenly looked up, her eyes shining brightly. Elder sister is still alive and has returned. With His Highness's intelligence, I'm afraid he already knew that elder sister is still alive. However, the situation is not stable yet. The 4 great families, Empress Murong, and even the retired emperor are watching him all the time. In order to ensure elder sister's safe return, it's best for him to marry a woman with no power and influence as the 3rd princess consort. Helian Wei Wei is the best choice. Bai Mai opened her mouth as if she couldn't believe it. You mean, my sister, she is still alive? Yes, she is now in White Academy. Heizhu looked at Bai Mai and smiled. It's a pity that I can't enter the palace. Otherwise, I would be able to send a message. But it doesn't matter, I've already told An Ying. An Ying will definitely tell His Highness what I know. Bai Mai did not speak. She lowered her eyes, as if she was thinking. She was sure that the matter of His Highness coming to White Academy to be a student was not known to many people. If she did not have a mission today, she would not have known, but my sister is back. His Highness's recent abnormal behavior could be explained. Like what Heizhu said, according to His Highness's character, it was impossible for him to act like this. If it was to make my sister safer, it was necessary to sacrifice Helian Vivian. Bai Mai lowered her eyes. Does Qingzhon know about this? I didn't tell her. Heizhu sneered. I don't know what that ugly woman said to her, making her willing to be a maid. Before His Highness gets the news about my sister's return, the fewer people know, the better. Chapter 290. Bai Mai frowned, but this can't be kept a secret. We are in the same academy. Qingzhon will see sister sooner or later. You don't have to worry about this. Sister has grown up. She is still as powerful as when she was young. But with that pharaoh-like appearance, even if Qingzhon and sister face each other, she won't be able to recognize sister. The more Heizhu spoke, the wider the smile on her face became. Just wait and see. When my sister comes out, that Helian Wei Wei will know what it means to be ashamed of herself. Even without His Highness making a choice, she will lose miserably. What's more, there won't be any doubt about His Highness' choice. That is sister, the person who accompanied His Highness before we even had men of sacrifice. Bai Mai admitted that Heizhu had convinced her. At that moment, she even had the urge to tell Heizhu about Beligaju's whereabouts. But after thinking about it, she calmed down. Just wait. She told herself that since sister had appeared, he believed that it wouldn't be long before the two of them met. His Highness had always hated others interfering in his affairs. Some things were better left to nature. This is the first test for you to join the battle spirit forces. Huan Mingxiong handed the paper to Helian Vivian and Yun Biluo. Find the old member of the battle spirit forces in the White Academy. In his hands, there is the next place you need to go. Helian Vivian raised her beautiful eyebrows. Find someone? Biluo should be fine. Luonyang seemed to be very confident in the person she brought in. Huan Mingxiong's expression didn't change as he faced Wei Wei and said, You guys have 2 chances to ask for help. If you really can't find this old member, you can ask the guide for information about this old member. In order to ensure absolute fairness, the 2 of us also don't know who this old member is. The key is that he has to admit it himself. Helian Vivian instantly understood. In fact, there was no difficulty in the beginning. The difficult part was the end. Even if they found the old member, he wouldn't admit it. After all, the concealment of the battle spirit forces was sometimes more important than anything else. Listen carefully. You only have 3 days. Huan Mingxiong looked at the distant moon. After 3 days, we will see the answer. Yun Biluo smiled gently with a faint cough. This kind of competition is really interesting. I hope Miss Helian will give me more advice in the future. Okay. Helian Vivian said, but her long eyebrows furrowed. Yuan Ming raised his thin lips. Woman, what's wrong? Do you think you can't beat her? According to my experience, this kind of question tests one's observation ability in the early stages and tests one's cooperation ability in the later stages. After all, Helian Vivian was the Queen of Arms. She had a special background, so she knew very well what the other party's ultimate goal was. Yuan Ming smiled. You mean, you want to cooperate with that woman? I'm just saying what the other party's ultimate goal is. As for cooperation, Hellion Vivian curled his thin lips. It depends on whether the other party is willing or not. Don't you always praise her for being interesting? Yuan Ming's eyes had an additional trace of innocence. It is indeed very interesting. Yuan Xiaoming, you are a demon. Hellion Vivian casually communicated with Yuan Ming through consciousness. Basically, the words of a demon should be heard the opposite way. Hearing this, Yuan Ming was stunned, then laughed. Woman, are you sure you haven't been to hell in your previous life? I'm really surprised that you know so much about us demons. So it's best not to hide anything from me in the future. Hellion Vivian's thin lips curved. Yuan Ming glanced at the crescent moon in the sky. We are talking about you and the third prince again. Don't hold a grudge against me. I am thinking for you. Do you think Hellion Vivian can do it? Huan Ming Xiong smiled faintly, but he didn't tell Wan Yang that at that time, it was Hellion Vivian who exposed his disguise as an old man sweeping the floor. Don't ever look down on that girl. It was a pity that the other party was a married woman. You're saying that it was because she met Jing Wushuang midway that I had to wait for so long? Beligaju coldly curled his thin lips, as if he didn't care. He loosened his collar with one hand, and the other hand lazily hung by his side. A cold light like splashed ink leaked out of his eyes, and he looked like he was smiling. However, those familiar with him knew that he wasn't smiling. The shadow guard who came to report only knew what he saw. He didn't know where Hellion Vivian had gone. Following the principle of saying less mistakes could be made, he lowered his eyes. Unbeknownst to her, her silent acquiescence caused Bailey Jiaoju's pair of deep eyes to slowly form a layer of frost. This made Hellion Vivian, who had just walked in, feel like she had been silently implicated. When Beligaju saw her, he calmly ordered the shadow guards, "You can leave first." Yes. After the others left, the room became very quiet. It was so quiet that even the sound of insects couldn't be heard. Perhaps it was because Beligaju had recovered his martial qi, and his body carried the aura of the fire Qilin. Usually, there were very few people in a place where the king of divine beasts lived. However, because it was too quiet, there was a slightly low pressure. Hellion Vivian felt that she was in the wrong. She glanced at the white moonlight and said, "There were a lot of things to do today, so I came late." If there were a lot of things to do, you could have asked the shadow to tell me. However, you didn't say anything. Beligaju's voice was very calm. Hellion Vivian hadn't expected this. Looking at the arrangement on his table, she knew that he had been waiting for a long time. However, she was too guarded to use the shadow. After the incident with He Zhu, she wasn't used to using other people. Beligaju looked at her and said, "You didn't take this matter to heart, or you are not willing to be with me at all." Hellion Vivian admitted that when she was busy, she did forget about this matter. However, she said, "I didn't do it on purpose. It's not that I'm unwilling. I'm just too busy." Too busy? Beligaju slightly curved the corner of his mouth. That kind of coldness. Hellion Vivian understood in an instant. "You are still looking for someone to follow me until now?" Beligaju didn't deny it. He had always done this. Hellion Vivian closed her eyes and was silent for a moment before saying, "If your highness doesn't trust me so much, why did you sign that contract? Since it's like this, I think that you and I need to think carefully about whether this contract should exist or not." Beligaju looked at her and said coldly, "You want to terminate the contract?" Hellion Vivian didn't say anything. Beligaju threw his robe to the side. The temperature of his body seemed to have dropped to the extreme. "Do as you wish." After that, he went into the inner room without looking back. Hellion Vivian looked at his back for a long time. The relationship between the two of them seemed to be very strong, but in fact, it was very fragile. Just like what people said. The reason why the two of them were together was because he had to deal with the retired emperor. The retired emperor seemed to be very satisfied with the two of them. This unconsciously reduced a lot of pressure on Beligaju. Here, it was not like in the palace where he was watched everywhere. He didn't need to show off his love, so it didn't matter. She reckoned that the third prince had figured this out, which was why he gave her such an answer. It would probably be out soon. After swallowing the strawberry, the magical beast glanced at Helly and Vivian, then took the initiative to move a little closer. Little Tiger Head happily leaned against his big, soft body. His eyes were already sleepy, but he still forced himself to nag at Helly and Vivian. The dean won't let me eat meat again. Why? Helly and Vivian pulled the little guy closer to her so that he could sleep more comfortably. Little Tiger Head's voice became even more muffled. I beat the Uncle Masters up and didn't let them go to the toilet. Helly and Vivian's mouth twitched. Who taught you this method? Third brother said that beating people up isn't good. You have to make them feel mentally broken. When I'm in class, the teachers always don't let me go to the toilet. I felt that this was very frustrating, so I let them have a taste of it. Little Tiger Head nodded and poked into Helly and Vivian's arms. Helly and Vivian rubbed her temples helplessly. They were indeed brothers. However, is it normal for magical beasts to appear near the school? Helly and Vivian asked Yuan Ming. Yuan Ming raised his eyebrows. It's not normal. But you have to ask Little White for the details. He knows more about these beasts than I do. Helly and Vivian nodded and didn't say anything more. She hugged the soft little guy in her arms and closed her eyes. When the two of them woke up, it was already time for dinner. Qing Zhon stood outside the cave, hesitating whether to go in or not. Then she saw Helly and Vivian holding the little seventh prince's hand and walking out. Little Tiger Head didn't treat Qing Zhon like how he treated Helly and Vivian. He glanced at her and asked, "Aren't you Li's man? Why are you with third sister-in-law?" Qing Zhon knelt on one knee respectfully. "Seventh prince, I am a royal man of sacrifice. I was mainly responsible for protecting young Master Lai. I was only transferred to Princess Consort's side 2 days ago." Oh, so she was third elder brother's man. Little Tiger Head put the stone back to its original position without thinking. Helly and Vivian looked around and didn't find any suitable place to eat. She held Little Tiger Head's hand and went to a pavilion in the superior compound. Little Tiger Head loved to eat meat. He bit on the bone with his small teeth and was so obedient that Qing Zhon couldn't believe it. She thought that no one could control the little seventh prince except for the third prince. Otherwise, the retired emperor wouldn't send the little seventh prince to the mountain to cultivate his character. She didn't expect. Qing Zhon's gaze fell on Helly and Vivian, who was wiping the little seventh prince's mouth with a handkerchief. She understood instantly. She thought that the only person who could get close to the little seventh prince purely because of love was the princess consort. The rest of the people were either for fame or profit. And those ladies from the officials' families, they got close to the little seventh prince just to get the attention of His Highness. But they forgot that although the little seventh prince was young, his way of doing things was more vicious than His Highness. As a child born in the royal family, how could he not see through their little tricks? It was probably because he saw too much, so when they heard the little seventh prince's name in the palace, they looked like they heard a tiger that could bite people. Helly and Vivian thought that Little Tiger Head was very interesting. He looked prickly but was comfortable to touch. When he was full, his soft and white belly would be exposed to the sun. Helly and Vivian was enjoying it when she heard a chuckle not far away. "We do have fate." Helly and Vivian couldn't help but look up and saw Yun Biluo, who was dressed in a long dress, standing under the flower tree. She had a pretty face and a fresh temperament. She was even prettier than Helly and Jiaoa, who was following behind her. Even I need time to get rid of those shadows. When the time comes, you won't be able to escape even if you have wings. No wonder there were no shadows behind her from the beginning. Not only the shadows, even Qingzhon was nowhere to be found. Hellion Vivian stopped in her tracks. When she looked back, her eyes were filled with hostility. What does my situation have to do with you? Murong Chang Feng, I'm too lazy to care about you. Don't always come here looking for trouble. A warning made Murong Chang Feng angry. Everything he said was for the good of this woman, but this woman didn't know what was good for her at all. Good, very good. I'll take it that I'm meddling in other people's business. I'd like to see to what extent you'll be played like a monkey by the third prince. Murong Chang Feng flicked his sleeves and left. There was a strong sense of unwillingness on his face. Hellion Vivian didn't even look at him. She continued to walk forward. She seemed to be at ease, but her eyes were a little low. She didn't know if it was because it was time, but the pain in her lower abdomen was more obvious. She really missed the brown sugar water of the 21st century. And those brothers in the Tang sect. Yuan Ming was silent for a long time before he spoke. Woman, no matter what, he was right about one thing. The heart of an emperor is unfathomable. I know. Hellion Vivian's voice was as lazy and calm as usual. When I decided to cooperate with the royal family, I knew what kind of situation I would encounter. But there was one thing that was beyond my expectations. If he has someone in his heart, it's really not suitable for us to cooperate anymore. Yuan Ming didn't speak. Hellion Vivian turned the umbrella that turned into a bracelet. Her eyes were faint, and there was a hint of mockery at the corner of her mouth. Indeed, it's better to rely on yourself than anyone else. Yuan Ming looked at her for a while before he said, Woman, don't forget that you still have the military seal and me. Hellion Vivian smiled. Of course I didn't forget. I know very well what I'm doing. If I don't send Hellion Guang Yarrow to hell personally, my rebirth in this life would be in vain. It's great that you can think this way. Yuan Ming realized that he really didn't know how to comfort people. What followed was a period of speechless silence. However, at this moment, Qingzhon was standing in front of Yun Biluo. There was a faint light in her eyes. If it wasn't because of what Heizhu said to her before, she might not have suspected anything. But now, this person, Qingzhon's sight changed along with Yun Biluo. Yun Biluo seemed to have seen her a long time ago, but she didn't plan to do anything. She looked back at her with gentle eyes. Qingzhon paused for a while before she took a step forward. She still retained the characteristics of a man of sacrifice. She wouldn't say much. Even if the other party was problematic, it was obviously not the right place to solve these problems. However, at this moment, Yun Biluo spoke with a smile in her voice. Since you recognized me, why didn't you come and say hello? Qingzhon, I haven't seen you for so many years. You've grown so tall. You're really different from the little girl back then. Since His Highness chose you, he must have his reasons. Qingzhon's voice was very calm. She tried to be calm, but in the end, it was obvious that she was not confident enough. Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows and smiled suddenly. It seems that you have a good relationship. Qingzhon did not realize the meaning of that smile. She was only thinking about what to say to minimize the damage. We are all men of sacrifice who follow His Highness. When I entered the palace, my sister was already there. She was the one who followed His Highness the longest. As his personal maid, she took care of His Highness since he was young. She knew His Highness's way of doing things better than any of us. His Highness also. Qingzhon paused and continued, His Highness also treated her well. It's just that a big fire destroyed everything. His Highness was seriously injured at that time. When he woke up, everything had changed. My sister was missing and His Highness lost his martial qi. He was unprecedentedly depressed. At that time, we all thought that my sister was dead. We didn't expect that she was still alive. The reason why she didn't come back was that the retired emperor didn't agree to the relationship between her and His Highness. He didn't want her to come back at all. Hellion Vivian said, "Oh, so she was a man of sacrifice. She even had such a relationship with Belagaju." Qing Zhon was stunned. "Princess, you didn't know?" "I know now." Hellion Vivian looked at her with a smile. "Qing Zhon, thank you. Your description is very concise and comprehensive. But just now, Princess." Qing Zhon stuttered a little. She felt that she was being tricked. She thought that Princess knew everything. Otherwise, why would she suddenly mention Miss Yoon? Hellion Vivian was very innocent. "I only guessed that you might know Miss Yoon because the way you looked at her didn't seem right. As for the rest, I'll just take it as a romantic story." "Romantic story? That's it." Qing Zhon looked up at Hellion Vivian's face from time to time. She found that there was no change in her expression at all. Suddenly, she was confused. Could it be that Hellion Vivian liked His Highness so much that she couldn't even notice the meaning in her words? The more it was like this, the more Qing Zhon felt that she had to say it out loud. "Princess, my sister is different from others. She is the person that His Highness cares about the most." Hellion Wei interrupted her. "So, who do you want to follow now? Are you going to look for her, or are you staying here?" Qing Zhon was stunned again. Hellion Vivian moved her fingers. When the black feathers fell, it was the sky that opened up. She held an umbrella. Occasionally, 1 or 2 drops of rain fell down and fell on the dust beside her feet. It bloomed like a silent flower. She said, "If this is a battle, go find her. You can be elegant and not have a trace of blood on your hands. You can be handsome and live a glorious life." The half-exposed white teeth at the corner of her mouth made her expression very difficult to guess. "Isn't this a bet?" "What is the bet?" Not knowing if it was because the contrast was too big, Heiju was a little confused and said, "Bet? It's okay if you don't know," but Hellion Vivian reached out to the side of the vertical guqin. Her movements were simple and neat. She plucked the strings of the guqin one by one. She then turned her head, squinted her eyes at Heiju, and said slowly, "If you don't know, then get out of my way. Don't be an eyesore." Heiju heard this and straightened her neck. Her temper was as expected. She would explode at the slightest provocation. But before she could speak, Yunbiluo held her hand and smiled at Hellion Vivian. "How about this? If I win, you give up your seat. If I lose, I will tell you all the information and clues this time. Give up my seat." Hellion Vivian repeated these 2 words playfully. She raised her eyes and looked at Nangong Lai. "Is this your idea? Or their idea?" After all, Nangong Lai could still speak on behalf of the third prince sometimes. Nangong Lai frowned and looked back at Yunbiluo. Then, he said to Hellion Vivian, "This has nothing to do with me. I just want to listen to the music." "Is that so?" Hellion Vivian lowered her eyes as if she was thinking about something. Heiju sneered, "Sister, why are you betting with her? As long as His Highness sees you, do you still need her to give up her seat? His Highness will definitely divorce her." Hearing this, Hellion Wei curled her lips into a smile. She raised her eyes and met Yunbiluo's gaze. "I'll bet with you. However, this bet is a little too small. If I lose, I can give up my position. It's just a title, you can take it if you want it. As for if I win, Heiju's tongue will be cut off to compensate me. What do you think? Miss Yun, do you want to bet?" Hearing this, Heiju suddenly looked at Yunbiluo. Yunbiluo remained silent, as if she was weighing the pros and cons. Heiju did not believe in evil. She said in a strange tone, "Sister, since the princess consort has said so, then let's bet. It's a good opportunity for everyone to enjoy." After all, sisters' music is different from ordinary people's. It's rare for people to have the opportunity to listen to it. All right. As if she had made an important decision, Yoon Biluo smiled at Hellion Vivian as if she was considerate of her. Miss Hellion Vivian, you probably haven't prepared anything yet. Shall I go first? Hellion Wei glanced at Yoon Biluo with a cold smile on her face. Qing Zhon was still worried about Hellion Vivian because she was also a death attendant. She knew better than anyone how powerful Yoon Biluo was. As Yoon Biluo spoke, she reached out her hand and let the servant girl pass her peeper. Her slender fingers just touched the strings of the peeper. The tinkling sound of the peeper was like the spring water flowing between the stones, gliding slowly past the ears. It was indescribably comfortable. Her voice was also very pleasant. Every frown, every smile, every note and every tune were played exquisitely. Chapter 299. The people in the tea house were already mesmerized by the music. When the song ended, Yoon Biluo stood up gently. Her figure was like a willow and her beauty won a round of applause. The more Chen Yixiong listened, the more he felt that their boss was dangerous. He glanced at Hellion Vivian worriedly. Their boss was good at assembling armaments, but when it came to singing, it was hard for him to imagine how his boss would sound like when she sang. Wouldn't it scare people away? Heizhu glanced at Hellion Vivian with a smug look on her face. She said to Yoon Biluo, "Sister, your guqin skills are getting better and better. I'm afraid no one will dare to play guqin and sing in front of you in the future." Yoon Biluo smiled. "Heizhu, that's enough. You're praising me too much. I'm telling the truth. You can ask Master Lai if you don't believe me." Heizhu looked at Nangong Lai. He's a person who knows how to appreciate guqin. Nangong Lai was, of course, a person who knew how to appreciate guqin. However, the current situation made his thin lips cold. Yoon Biluo was afraid that he would think too much, so she quickly pulled Heizhu back. She looked at Hellion Vivian with rippling eyes. "Miss Hellion Vivian, it's your turn." Heizhu did not say anything, but she acted as if they had already won. Hellion Vivian did not look at her. She picked up the guqin but did not play it. Instead, she flipped it with one hand so that one end of the guqin was on the ground and the other end was upright. It was just enough for her to hold it in her hand. No way, she doesn't even know how to hold the guqin. Just when everyone was laughing involuntarily at Hellion Wei's actions, suddenly, a low and deep voice came out from his throat. "The wind brightens the snowflakes. The wind whitens our hair. We said we would conquer the world together. Do you still remember? It was midsummer that year. Our wish was infinitely big. Hand in hand, we became a boat. Across the river of sorrow." Hellion Wei's voice had always been deeper than other women's, and now that she was on her period, her voice was slightly hoarse. It was almost from the first sentence that she spoke. It caught everyone's ears. Not to mention others, even Nangong Lai's eyes flashed with a trace of amazement. That kind of melody, that kind of singing voice, had never been heard before. At this moment, a flute suddenly sounded from upstairs. It was actually a song that was sung by Hellion Vivian. Hellion Vivian paused for a moment. She looked upstairs and her eyes met with a pair of twinkling eyes. She saw that Jing Wushuang was looking at her gently. His ivory-white clothes outlined his figure even more elegantly. He looked like a person who had walked out of an ink painting. Occasionally, when the wind blew, he would brush it away with a smile. His movements were slow and elegant. He was so handsome that it could make people in the world suffocate. The sound of Jing Wushuang's flute was not as simple as it sounded pleasing to the ears. The sound of the flute carried a gentle inner force, as steady as flowing water. It seemed to be able to soothe the restlessness and uneasiness in one's heart, and it had a warm and gentle power. Hellion Vivian smiled. Her voice became deeper and more pleasing to the ears. It was as if it had been moisturized and blended with the beautiful flute sound. She looked at the people who were listening to the song. Her eyes were shining like a singer who was telling a heartbreaking story. We agreed not to separate. We will always be together. Even if we are enemies with time. Even if we are against the whole world. Innocent time cannot be bullied. Youth is absurd, I will not let you down. Snow begs you not to erase the traces of us being together. When the song fell, the flute sound stopped. The tea house was silent. Chen Yifeng was really dumbfounded. Only when Hellion Vivian put down the zither and walked to his side did he react. Yun Biluo did not expect that Heizhu would attack without warning. Not only that, she was so ruthless. She caught Heizhu in one go. Looking at the blood gushing out of her body, she quickly stuffed a pill into her mouth. Hellion Vivian did not care about them at all. She glanced at a few students from the superior compound who gasped. Hellion Jiaowa was one of them. How many times have I told you? I'm not the useless person I used to be. You just don't listen and keep coming to me. Chen Yifeng. Yes. Boss, I'm here. I'm here. Chen Yifeng came over excitedly. Who do you want to beat? Just say it. Hellion Vivian knocked on his head. Can beating people solve the problem? We are cultured people. Don't always fight and kill. Chen Yifeng thought. Then who was the one who was fighting and killing just now? I'll listen to boss's instructions. His old man said to follow their boss. She was a powerful woman. Hellion Vivian spoke in a calm tone. It was because it was so calm that it made people's scalps tingle. Find out which families they are from. Organize the information and hand it to the dean. Tell him that they are suspected of bullying their classmates. Violence is not allowed in the academy. Yes. Chen Yifeng lowered his eyes and thought to himself. His boss's skill of beating people up was getting better and better. Although those people really like to get together and laugh at others, where did the term violence in the academy come from? After Hellion Vivian dealt with them, she did not care about the expressions of Yun Biluo and the others, including Nangong Lai. She lifted her long legs and walked toward the second floor. As she walked, she wanted to tie up her long hair. Unfortunately, when she was beating people up just now, just as she was thinking, suddenly, a pair of jade-like hands extended in front of Hellion Wei's eyes, carrying a light medicinal fragrance, holding a simple and unadorned hairpin, revealing a calmness that made people feel at ease. Here. Hellion Vivian raised her head and saw Jing Wushuang's deep black eyes. She raised her eyebrows in surprise. Why is it with you? Jing Wushuang smiled but did not say anything. Her hand that was holding the hairpin reached out to her, signaling her to tie up her hair. Hellion Vivian took it and tied up her hair. She looked calm, as if the person who was angry just now was not her. There was a hint of laziness in her elegance. Jing Wushuang nodded in satisfaction when she saw that the woman had tied up her hair again. Her lips were still smiling lightly. This suits you better. That's why I'm a gentle person. Hellion Vivian smiled handsomely. The alienation in her eyes gradually disappeared. Thanks for just now. You played the flute very well. That's because you sang well. Jing Wushuang smiled and coughed lightly. This is the first time I've heard such a song. Even if I'm against time, even if I'm against the whole world, the only thing I want in life is to have a confidant. The corner of Hellion Wei's mouth slightly curved. If young Master Wushuang opens his mouth, countless female confidants will follow one after another. Me. Jing Wushuang looked at Hellion Vivian's black eyes. The curve of her eyes was especially gentle. Forget about me. Do you want to have a cup of tea before you leave? I happen to have a martial arts practitioner here that I can't figure out.